Illegal fishing is probably one of the hardest things to stop in international waters, what we call the high seas, especially when you're in a region that we don't really know much about, like North Korea and Russia. Here in North America, we don't really cover that area that much, but on today's episode, I'm going to be talking about a study that looked at illegal fishing practices in North Korean waters and in Russian waters. You're going to be surprised to see some of the results and how they got such results. That's on this episode of the Speak Up for the Ocean Blue podcast, the video podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the Speak Up for the Ocean Blue podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. This is the video podcast, my second episode for this podcast. Hope you liked the first. If you haven't seen it, just click on the link somewhere around here and you will see the first episode. Today we're going to be talking about a study that came out of Global Fisheries Watch. It's an organization that looks at international fisheries, and today we're going to North Korea and Russia to look at a study that was done for the years of 2017 and 2018 and then redone for 2019 and a bit of 2020 this year. Now, the paper for the study that was done in 2017 and 2019 was published in the journal that I'm going to list down below, and you can take a look at it there if you would like. I'll also put the link to the article that I read it on Global Fisheries Watch website, and you can take a look there too. Essentially, in this study in 2017-2018, Global Fisheries Watch looked at how North Korean waters were fished. They also looked at how Russian waters were fished and looked at what illegal activity happened at that time. Now, the study was duplicated for 2019 and 2020. They looked at the same type of study, same type of methods, optical imagery, night optical imagery, a type of satellite that looks through clouds. It's a really interesting way of monitoring illegal fisheries practice because essentially what it does is it gives you a lot of different ways to monitor what's happening on the seas. You've got the during the day, the optical imagery that you can see. During the day, you can see what's happening, what ships are moving where. You can even identify the ships and where their locations are at specific times of the year and specific times of the day. You look at night imagery when actual fishing occurs, especially with the Pacific squid fishery. You can see how lights are used on the boats to attract the squid at night, so that nighttime imagery really comes into play. And then you have sort of the radar sat, what I like to call radar sat because that's the Canadian payload for the satellite, but essentially that looks through clouds because optical and night imagery can really be cloudy. Essentially, there are clouds that happen quite often over the seas, and if you have imagery that can't see through clouds, it's no good. Radar technology can actually see through clouds. Radar satellites can see through clouds, and you can see what boats are on the ocean. And the last thing, which is actually the first thing I mentioned, AIS, which is actually a GPS technology for ships. It happens for shipping. It happens for other types of vessels like fisheries vessels, any type, even cruise liners. You can tell, it basically allows people, especially governments, to tell where ships are at what time. I've worked with this data before for analysis of where shipping lanes occur, where the most used paths for shipping is occurring on the ocean. So it's kind of an interesting way to look at where ships are, that you get the registration, where they registered, what country they registered in, and if they have it turned on, which they should always have it turned on, you get to see where these ships are at any point in time. The study used each of those methods to look at where fishing was happening in North Korean waters. They noticed that hundreds of Chinese vessels were illegally fishing in North Korea. Why are they illegally fishing? Because the sanctions against North Korea by the UN prohibit anybody from fishing within North Korean waters. Now, a couple hundred boats, maybe even a couple thousand boats that are coming in from China are actually fishing within that area, illegally fishing. The other part of the study where they were looking at what North Koreans were doing in Russian waters, because that's where they were found. Over 2,000 boats were found between the years 2017 and 2018. Unfortunately, they found some of those boats washing up ashore in what we call ghost ships. Essentially, those ships were not equipped to take that travel or to take that weather, and the people on there died or they got thrown overboard, and the ships were just running with nobody on them, or they just washed up with nobody on them, or unfortunately even dead bodies on them. And even though some of those boats perished in the sea. There was quite a lot of illegal fishing activity in that area. So you have North Koreans fishing in Russian waters. You have Chinese fishing boats fishing in North Korean waters. It just seems like a lot of illegal activity. Now, during 2019 and the beginning of 2020, they noticed that there were less boats in Russian waters from North Korea, but they still noticed that there was illegal activity. Nothing had really happened, and that's what they wanted to prove. Over the 2 years that they found that there was illegal activity and they reported it, nothing really happened. Now, one thing that did happen, which I covered on the Speak Up for the Ocean Blue audio podcast, which I'll put the link in the description below, was that China redid their distance water fleet policies. Now, what does that mean? They have this huge fleet of about 3,000 vessels that go all over the world and fish, a lot of times illegally, in international waters and sometimes in the exclusive economic zone of a lot of countries. Indonesia has been known to blow some of these boats out of the water. These fishing boats have been found at the edge of the Galapagos marine protected areas. We've seen them pretty much everywhere. When there's illegal fishing happens, a lot of the times China boats are involved. So this new policy was redone in hopes of dealing with a specific committee that deals with a lot of port authorities. Essentially what happens is the new policies forbid people in China to illegally fish all over the world. When they come back to the ports, they get searched. If they get caught, the captain loses his license for 3 years, and the manager who's managing the operation loses his job for 3 years. Now, whether this policy will be enforced is another thing, but it's something that's good because China is involved in a lot of illegal fishing activity, and now there's actually repercussions for a lot of these boats. Before, it was just a fine. They turn around and they go back out again once they pay that fine. A lot of times the fine wasn't big enough to really deter people from going back out. So that's your update for the news of what's happening in an international water, especially North Korea and Russia, where we don't normally see it. I'd love to ask you the question, what do you think? Do you think these new Chinese policies will help reduce illegal activity? Let me know in the comments below. Love to hear your thoughts. And if you want to join our Speak Up for Blue Facebook group, you can do so at speakupforblue.com/group. It's where we go to discuss all things oceans. You can discuss it with me. You can discuss it with other people in the group. We have over 1,500 people there. I'd love to see you in there. All you have to do is just answer a couple of questions. I'll let you in. You get to discuss oceans. It's a lot of fun. But if not, just subscribe to this channel. Ring that bell for notifications so that you do not miss any other episodes that we have coming out. And until next time, thank you so much for joining us here on the Speak Up for the Ocean Blue video podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.